Hey everyone, welcome to Ask Shane B, where we are getting into all your questions about leading worship. I'm Jeremy Jaquia, joined here as always by Shane Barnard.
Hey,
Shane and Shane. We are getting into a really great question today that I think hopefully will be really helpful for everyone out there who uses in-ear monitors. So that's what we're talking about today, how to get a good in-ear monitor mix. This question comes from David. He says, hello, this is a question that I can't seem to find a good answer for anywhere I look. What does your in-ear monitoring mix sound like? Is it just the bare minimum essentials like mini forms or guides suggest? Is it main vocal, click, your instrument, and a little bit of the other stuff? Or does it sound pretty much like what it would sound like from front of house and the audience? This question for me is hard because I understand that having just the bare minimum helps hear the click better and thus have better time and performance overall, but at the same time, it's hard to feel the room and just feels like you're singing, playing in a studio or booth. Also, if I'm playing an instrument, say electric guitar, how can I know what I sound like to the audience if my mix is not the same? You all have been such a blessing and an encouragement in him, David.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David, for that question. And I know that this is a hot topic for anyone who's leading in church, playing instruments in church.
Yep.
And I would just start a couple scriptures that come to mind. Psalm 33:3, sing to him a new song, play skillfully on the strings with loud shouts. 1 Corinthians 10:31, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. And so just on a high level, man, in-ears can really help us accomplish our mission of playing excellently, communicating the gospel in a way that people would hear it. And I have been in rooms where there's 7 people on stage and there's 2 monitors, and it's just hard. It's hard to play in a way that people can hear what you're trying to present so that they can teach and admonish one another in all wisdom through songs, hymns, and spiritual songs. It's just hard. It's hard to lead it. It's hard to follow it. And so in-ears, if you don't have in-ears, man, they can serve you so well. And so, we'll get into in-ears later, like an in-depth worship initiative podcast, where you can talk about what kinds of in-ear systems. I mean, you could go that particular church. I ended up getting there was 3 aux sends out of this tiny little board. So we had 3 mixes going into 3 little preamp guys that would mount on your, not like a Avia multi thing, just a preamp with a headphone jack, with 4 headphone jacks actually. So you could do 4 headphone jacks out of one mix, and there was 3 mixes, and so we could split everybody up one of 3 mixes, and you can add stuff, and it transformed the whole thing. It's like, oh my gosh. All of a sudden, I can hear what the other guy's doing. I can the opportunity to have a click track, because obviously, if you have monitors, you're going to pipe a click track through the monitors, and that's no good. And so there was an opportunity to play with a metronome, and all of a sudden, people are playing together, and it was great. So anyway, high level, this is a good conversation. David, thank you for asking. And so I think what we're going to do is I'm going to just talk about what I do, and maybe that can trigger some thoughts, because I feel like, does it feel like David's a worship leader?
Seems that way.
Yeah.
I think so.
And Jeremy's going to talk about what he does, which is really slightly different than what I do. And then I'm going to talk about what Shane Everett does, which is drastically different to what I do. And then anything that comes out in between all that. And so what I do, here's how I approach an in-ear mix, which has been a long undertaking to kind of figure this out. First of all, I'm assuming we are talking about in your church. It's a different conversation when you're like, I'm a church setup. I'm a church plant. We're setting up, so we have to get a sound check every single time. Or, if you're touring and so you're in a different place, that's kind of a different conversation. We'll shelf that a little bit, because at that point, you just have a certain amount of time, and so you're budgeting your time, and you may not have just the time to dig into your in-ear mix. And so it's going to be a lot more utilitarian, kind of like what you said. Give me the bare essentials and let's move on because we got 30 minutes to rehearse and here we go. And so that's a whole nother conversation. But if you're at a church, you have a monitor rig that stays pretty consistent, then here's what I do, because that's what we have. Is we have a digital board, so it saves settings, and so you can create one and you can dial it up the next time. I start in a similar way that I would start creating a mix on a tune here in the studio. And so I get the drums sounded awesome. Again, one of the first questions I will ask when I'm making an in-ear mix, and so this is going to be helpful to you, is and Jeremy knows that when we go out and play, even if we're not at our church but playing elsewhere, one of the first questions I ask is, can you give me verb? It's a huge question. Can you pipe reverb into a channel on this little thing that you're going to give me? Or can you just, if I just have a pack, can you give me some vocal verb? Because that's going to dictate a lot of how I make my mix. And I think you know what I'm talking about, because it is finding that balance between I want to play on beat, I want to play in tune, and I want to be inspired. And if I can't do any one of those three, then I don't feel like I'm accomplishing the mission well. And so that's a huge question. At our church, our little onboard thing, in the studio here, we have Avium units, and they have a reverb. You can put reverb on any channel that you want. And on the stage in there, we have Rolands, and you can put reverb on any channel. And so I start with a drum mix. And so, I have, on the kick and snare are on their own channel. And then there's an overall tom, hat, overhead mix. And so sometimes you might have every drum on its own. Sometimes you might have a stereo pair that have a drum mix in just on a stereo. Maybe it's even just a mono. Sometimes there's just a whole drum mix in one channel and it's just mono if you just are dealing with a mono mix. But I just start there of just, here we go, drum, a kick, snare, toms. I'm hearing everything. It sounds great. I have verb on it. Our little units even have EQ, options that you can apply to each channel. And so I'm rolling a couple mid-range things out. And so I'm starting with the drums, bring in the bass guitar. Man, that's feeling great. I bring in the keys, boomski. Keys are feeling great. I bring in the electric guitar. If there's two, I'm panning them, right and left to kind of separate them. I want to hear, because I am a little bit more of an emotional person. I just am. I want to know what everybody's doing, because one, I want to be able to lead the band well, and so I want to know how to communicate with them. So I need to know what they're doing, and also I do want to experience what our team brings together in music. And so I'm creating a mix with the band. And then I just bump my guitar. I bump the click track to where over all of that, I can hear that thing cut through. And so I would say it's going to be louder than the drums are. So I bump the click track up in my in-ear mix, and then I bump my guitar up louder than everything, and I bump my vocal up louder than everything. But not to a level where I can't feel the band. And so it's like making a good mix, and I can put reverb where I am at. I can put reverb on my vocal, and so I use both ears. I put both ears in. I smother myself in verb. Again, there's a compromise there, because I have a relationship with our front of house guy that there's been several times where he's in while we're rehearsing. He's like, he chimes in with a little deal, and he's like, Shane, you're kind of flat, singing flat. And typically that's because I just am getting a little frisky with that reverb knob, and I got that thing cranked up. And so there is a compromise there. And so I create a mix to where it's like I can hear everything. The main things to me are hearing drums and click, but I have a really great drummer. And so again, you're going to be, there has been times where I've played with a band and I've almost turned the click track off because nobody's playing with it. And so that's a whole nother conversation. Mm-hmm. So all this is assuming that, which we have a lot of resources. That's what we do at the Worship Initiative, to help people with their fundamentals of like how to play with a click, how to play in time, how to play in tune, how to get good tone, all those things. So this is all this conversation that we're having is kind of after all of that has been established and you've been walking in that. And so typically whoever's playing the drums, I'm not going to be fighting much between the click and the drums. And so those are going to be fine. I mean, that's the point. That's the goal, is that the click track kind of goes away in big courses because, I have Jeremy Hott and I'm singing my face off and I'm not struggling to play on beat. And I don't even hear the click because it just disappears. And that's what a good drummer does. And so that's how I approach my in-ear mix. And so I would say there's a lot of places that I go, and this is not something that's good for your hearing. But I take my right ear out because, again, I want to have the click track. I want to play in time. I want to be able to hear myself, and I want to be inspired. And so, in order to accomplish that third one, a lot of times I need to take my right ear out because we don't have the time or the space to get to where I need to get to be inspired in that way. Because we have a consistent setup at our church, I can get there and then we can recall it and I can go right back to where I was. And so there is a time and place where you can have that click. Oftentimes, if like our worship leader, John Abel, he took his right ear off the deal. So the click track doesn't bleed through there, I'm assuming. And then he just uses his left ear. So he's just like embraced it. And that's okay. And so that, but that click, if I'm at a place and I bail on my right ear, I throw it over my shoulder so the click track doesn't, because I listen to the click pretty loud, and I'll throw it over my shoulder so the click is, I have a barrier between the click, because if it's here, it's going to be like, you're going to hear it. And I'm just, okay, I gave it my best shot to use both my ears, and often, if I'm in a situation that's not at my local church, I bail on it, throw it over my shoulder. Here we go. I'm fighting at that point to hear the click, but I'm a lot more inspired. Yep. Because I know what you mean. I mean, in-ears, I mean, it's like the first time you use them, it's like you're plugging your ears. It's like it's just like, yeah, just get me out of this cave. And so, getting used to that, especially as a singer. I mean, if I were a player, I would have a ball with in-ear mixes. I mean, I would just be jamming so hardcore. And as a singer, it's totally different. One thing I would add about being a singer in an in-ear mix is after, and this is a big one. Sorry, this just came to mind. After I get an epic mix, the best mix I can, I turn the bass knob on my unit down to like 9, 10 o'clock. So I just turn it down. And then I turn the treble knob, I turn it up to like 2 o'clock. Part of that's because I'm deaf. And then I turn I bump the 2K in my vocal, which is kind of ugly. It's like, and I also crank the 10 to 12K, so the top, treble, top of the spectrum range. And I do that just in my, we have these little mini console Roland guys, and even on the Aviums that we have, you can do that on each channel. So I'm not cranking the top end on the whole mix. I'm just cranking the top end because I'm trying to carve out a way for me to hear my vocal. And again, this is all underneath the banner of reverb too. So I wouldn't do that if I didn't have reverb, because it would be unbearable. I couldn't do it. I couldn't listen to myself. But because I do have the option to add reverb, I want to add the ugly to my voice so I can hear my pitch. And so that's a way to compensate with, okay, I have the reverb I like. It has enough noise in it where it's inspiring me. And then I add some ugly to it so that I can find my note. And so I'm carving out a space for my vocal. I have the click track, and lots of times I'll roll some top into the click track depending on what kind of sound it is, or I'll roll out a little bit of low end. Sometimes I'll be in the middle of a mix and I'll roll low end out of the kick and bass. And also often as I go into each instrument and I just take the low mids out of, keys, electrics, and once I have that mix, if I'm fighting to get my vocal, I'm just trying to roll out frequencies. And if you have a good monitor guy, this is what he's going to try to do. I'm going to be rolling out frequencies that are competing with my vocal. And so I hear the top end, but I'm not hearing my low mids. And so I get rid of those low mids and other instruments so that I can still hear the instruments, but my vocal kind of sits on top there. And so I don't know. That was a lot of rambling for you, David. I don't know if that's helpful, but those are some things that I do.
I think it's super helpful. I think the overall point of even having this conversation is we're trying to figure out always how can we we've answered lots of questions on this resource about instruments and gear and all kinds of different things, but with the tools that are at your disposal, how are you using them as best you can to play the role that you're playing as best you can? And that's the really important thing. It's like, how do I execute this role of leading worship as the worship leader or as a musician in the band in a way that, like, I am executing really well to accomplish this purpose, to be a part of what God's doing. And so when you think about crafting your in-ear mix, you have to think through that lens. And sometimes that means, like you've talked about, you've got the things at your disposal where you can make it really inspiring sounding, make it really like sound like a record, but still functional. And sometimes you don't have that luxury, and you've got to just get in your ears the things you need to hear to execute. And so I'm very similar to Shane in how I build an in-ear mix, in the sense that if at all possible, like at our church with these consoles, they're amazing, where you can, really dial in how you want it to sound. And the drums sound better through this thing than anywhere I ever play. And so it sounds like this amazing record in my ears all the time with just the drums really loud. I just make it, I kind of have everybody in the mix. There's a lot of drummers that like don't put much electric or don't put whatever, but it's like, I kind of like
a lot of click track.
Ton of click.
Very utilitarian.
It's
approach.
like, yeah, totally. And I do too. Like I have, the loudest things in my mix are click track, drums, kick, snare, vocal. Drums in general are all pretty loud. And one thing that I have the luxury of doing with our setup is having the overheads pretty loud where they sound good. It's not like this unbearable harshness, but they're loud enough to where I have an accurate understanding of how loud I'm really playing. And so for any drummers that are listening to this or watching this, or just worship leaders that are watching this and listening to this,
that can pass it on to their drummers.
Pass it on to your drummers. That's really something you have to consider, because there's places where I go, or if we're playing in a different church or we're just in a different scenario where either maybe they don't even have overhead mics set up, or maybe the mics that they have they're just not, you're not going to get the sound of your overheads in an accurate way to really have a good understanding of how it's really sounding of what you're playing, which is going to be a big deal depending on, for 95% of the folks leading worship, you're in probably a pretty smaller room, or even if you're in a big room, like the volume of your cymbals is a big deal. And you don't, especially if you're playing with in-ears, if you don't have an accurate picture of what you're doing, man, it can ruin everything. Like it can just be this giant distraction to everybody, to the congregation, to your worship leader, to your sound guy, to your production people. Everybody's distracted by it because they're all trying to manage it. And you're just in your happy place, going to town, oblivious to the fact that you're just killing everybody with how loud your cymbals are because you don't have an accurate picture of what's going on in your ears. And so that could be because you just don't have them up loud enough, or it could be because there's compression running through your intermix, meaning that the louder you play, it's keeping the overall volume of those microphones at a certain level. So no matter how loud you're playing or how quiet you're playing, it's kind of keeping it in the same range. And so the more you dig in, it just kind of stays at that comfy little level in your ears, and you're just slamming. But man, it's the person on the front row can't hear a word that the worship leader is singing because of how hard you're hitting your ride cymbal, because it's not accurate in your ears. And so you got to think about those things. I'm always thinking about those things when I'm setting up an in-ear mix. But in an ideal world, I'm the same way. I want to be inspired. I love leading with passion and emotion, and connecting my heart to what we're singing and what's going on in the room. And oftentimes that means just having it sound really amazing is helpful in that. It's stirring to me emotionally and how I connect with the Lord as I'm playing. And so to the degree that I'm able to do that, I want to do it with the caveat of like there's functionality involved in that, of having a really loud click track. The drums are the most obviously prominent thing in my mix. I play a lot off of like the vocal. Like I'm always wanting to like know what the vocal's doing rhythmically even, and what the keys are doing, and if I'm doing light stuff that's going with the keys. And so I'm functional, but try to make it inspiring as best I can too.
Man, that is so helpful. And guys, like drummers, I mean, you guys know, I mean, drummers are so important, and their role is so important. You drummers, it's like you're almost like a level of a sound guy. A good sound guy can make or break it. They can make it super painful. A drummer can make it super painful, or he can make it glorious. And one thing that a good in-ear mix does for a drummer is it starts proving to them that playing loud is not necessarily what you're going for. Because typically, if you love drums, you grew up playing the drums, a lot of those thoughts don't happen because you just played with a Pearl Jam in your ears or whatever, and you're just smashing drums, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, I can play that. And man, having done this for 20 years, I mean, whether it's a room or whether it's the studio, it is amazing. And there's been times where we've had drummers on the road where I go up there on the kit and I just go, let me just A-B this, go out in front. And I go,
as hard as you can.
Sorry, it's a little intense there.
Wow. We're okay.
And then I just go, and it sounds massive out there because they're hearing the drum through the speakers and not off the stage. So that's the goal. If you have mic'd drums, if your drums are mic'd, you're trying to get those drums to come out of those speakers and hit people's ears instead of coming off that drum and hitting people's ears. That would be the goal. That's hard in small rooms, and some people don't even have their drums mic'd. And so, which doesn't mean play loud if you don't have your drums mic'd. And so in-ear mixes really help you with that, of like, you can tell now of like, hit it really hard and then hit it soft. And it's like, oh, and a lot of that's going to take drummers like have to relearn how to play, because a lot of folks, that just doesn't, it's not fun anymore.
Right.
If you can't hit at a certain velocity, it just becomes
And I'm not great at like playing soft. Like I have to be really intentional about it. I have to be thoughtful about it. And there's plenty of times where it is okay to kind of like, I mean, we're in certain scenarios from time to time where it's like, it's okay to just play loud and we can whatever. But you just got to like know you're doing it, know why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Be able to be in control of it. And in the same way that there's times where you throw an ear out of your right ear, there's times I have to do that as well, because I know maybe if we don't have time, or if you're short on time, if you're a set up and tear down church, and I'm not going to get an accurate picture of the volume that I'm playing at if I have both ears in.
Yeah.
Throw an ear out. I mean, it's
so you don't overplay.
Audiologists, don't listen to me, because it's gonna mess up your hearing. But it's like you've got that's a way to have the accurate picture. Your ear's right next to that ride cymbal.
Change your sticks.
Possibly.
Something. There's things that you can do.
Do something to get the accurate picture of what you're doing. I mean, that's the general principle of an in-ear mix. Totally. Like, do whatever you need to do to get an accurate picture of what you're doing.
Shane Everett, if he were here, he looks very passionate on stage, and he is. He's very passionate about what he does. But he has a little bit of click, enough to hear it. He has me, my vocal, and my guitar, and his vocal super loud, and just a hint of the band, and no reverb. And he doesn't have an ear out. He kind of puts a little air in his ears. You can see him twist them a little bit. And he's going, I want to play my role well. My role is to match your voice with harmony. And so that's also a helpful thing to know, is there is no rule. There's no rule for you. And so I would just take an in-ear thing and say, under the banner of my mission and my vision of serving folks well in my church, how do I build a mix where I can stay inspired, I can be solid with my time, I can hear myself, I can hear my band, and you're trying to accomplish those the best way you can. But sometimes if you're like Shani, I want to do what I do really well, and I'm going to just make sure I have him and me and click, and that's about all I want. And that's the same. He's the same way in the studio too. And so I hope that's a blessing. Just a whole gamut of different options there for you. Again, we're going to be this is going to be a common topic for us just on our Worship Initiative podcast. But keep on sending in your questions. We love serving you in any way we can, and we're going to keep doing it.
Great. You guys can send your questions to askShaneB@worshipinitiative.com. We're loving this, getting into all these questions. Nothing is off limits. Any question you have about worship leading, send them, and we're going to keep this thing going. Thanks for joining us.
Come on.
See you guys.